Hey, hello everyone. A very good morning, good afternoon, and good evening based on the location and time zone from where you are watching this. My name is Rajat Sharma. I will be taking a session on a very interesting subject, the whole evolution of DevOps, or I would call it DevSecOps, and where it is heading towards. Right. So let me show or share my screen with you, and then we can go through in detail. One of the disclaimers from my side is you will find quite a lot of extensive content from this presentation, and I've deliberately kept the content heavy because I wanted you to get this as a takeaway and understand as much as you can from this session. So this is the flow of the content in this session. So I'll talk a little bit about myself. Again, a little bit of crowded slide, but I'll give you the crisp crux of my 30 years of career. Then we are going to talk more about the enterprise landscape and the IT processes as well as operating models. And I deliberately want to touch upon this for all of us to be on the same page as we dwell deeper into DevOps, right? And then, of course, we are going to talk about how DevOps is enabling what today's enterprises are looking for. Some of the aspects of dev challenges, some of the aspects of operate challenges, and both evolution of the development as well as operations, and obviously the consolidated view of where we are heading towards, or what is the next generation or next wave of DevSecOps. So this is about me. As I said, a little bit of cluttered slide, but I work for Zensar. I'm the Chief Growth Officer at Zensar. In addition to my role of responsible for the growth and business of the firm, I also run the platform business. So what it means is anything and everything to do with the platform, be it solutioning, be it partner ecosystem, be it thought leadership, analyst, and advisors. So I look after that whole 9 yards. I have been in industry for 30 years. I have a pedigree of working with the big fours. I used to work at Deloitte. I was a partner at Deloitte. I was responsible or helping Deloitte make that pivot from Deloitte Digital to Deloitte Cloud. I was also with Accenture when Accenture was trying to build their intelligent cloud infrastructure for their largest industry vertical, communication, media, and tech. One of the first 50 cloud advisors certified by Carnegie Mellon University. In addition to that, I am also on an advisory board for a number of startups out of California. Currently working with a company called Modal, started by ex-founder and president of Udemy. I'm also on the Forbes Technology Council. I'm also on a CIO Council. Actually, I'm on the governing body of Evanta, which is the CIO Council for New Jersey. That's a little bit about myself. Let me move on to give you a little bit view of the whole enterprise systems and primarily how they are structured. So if you look into these 5 layers, you will find the topmost layer is more of a layer which is more prominent to manufacturing industry. Of course, the same translates into other industries like banking, financial services, in a very, very different context, right? In manufacturing, if you have supply chain and CRM and ERP, you have back office, middle office, and front office in the financial services, right? And why I'm showing you is to give you a holistic view of a typical enterprise, how they work, because most enterprises are very, very domain centric or industry centric also. So the way they basically consume IT also is not standard, right? There is a operational technology, big footprint in the manufacturing, whereas there is a big IT and communication footprint in non-manufacturing or non-retail kind of customers, right? If you look into the lower three layers, and which are very interesting, are very, very important. One is, of course, the data, which has basically moved from old traditional structured relational aspect to unstructured, semi-structured, more in motion, right? Because we see a lot of consumption uh, of the data and applications on the move. And if you pivot towards that arrow of right, and that's where we are heading towards in terms of not only just analyzing the data and creating large language models to basically create inference, but also getting into more generative aspects where it's more structuring as well as storyboarding coming out of it, right? And then the underneath is, of course, the core infrastructure layer, and then which is basically a compute, storage, network, and now it's more container and container clusters. And then, of course, the layer which is a hypervisor layer, and then above that is your operating system, databases, and microservices, or in some cases, middleware, which used to host the business logic, right? And the bottommost layer is the security, which is basically primarily centered from device to cloud, right? And again, has connotations right from data to physical. And then, of course, a lot of industries are regulatory centric also. Let me move on to the next slide. So you saw the enterprise view. Now look into the IT view. So in IT, typical enterprises run two core areas. One is basically uh, run the business, and second is change the business. And the run the business is basically the op of DevOps, right? Or I would say SecOps, because Sec also falls under run in terms of how do you do the application production support, the application uh, incident management, change management, configuration management, release management, the whole ITIL processes and service management around that. And same with infrastructure, data, security. And on the change side, you'll find more of new developments, enhancements, more upgrades, testing, any new product. And the transform is basically, which has become more and more prominent with the advent of cloud, is where basically we start moving out of old legacy systems and processes to next generation architectures. Of course, we saw the architectures evolving, and we'll see that both on the app side as well as on the infra side, as I will walk you through the evolution of these. Moving on to the next slide. These are the 6 core tenets of a high velocity enterprise, which basically has been articulated or conceived by me. And these resonate with different CXOs, right? Not only just the chief information or chief technology officer, but chief customer officer, chief experience officer, chief data officer. And one of the common theme which resonates with everyone is, how can I build the high velocity composable enterprise? What it means is where it's very easy to create, to manage, to secure, to deploy, and consume product and services, right? And I can basically pivot very fast for any change, be it in the external environments, which we saw coming from COVID, or even these wars which we are going through, or internal changes based on the organizational structure or organizational products or clientele or new markets, and so on and so forth. Right? So now let's look into the priorities of these high velocity enterprise. Their priorities, of course, transform, which is one of the highest core priority. The earlier I can pivot to my future state architecture, and I'm calling it future state because it's not you pivot and achieve one target state and then stand still there. It's ever evolving, right? But how do I go to a state where I have a composable architecture and I can continue to evolve very, very fast and with very high velocity, right? And of course, how do I cater to multi-experience and data? Similarly, on optimize is the area of operations, whether it is cloud operating model or IT operating model or service management or spend management, which has again come and taken a center stage. And last but not the least is the innovate, in terms of how do I basically get a competitive edge in comparison to my peers in the industry, right? How do I basically bring more and more innovation to my clients, right? How do I embrace the new economies, be it API, be it gig economy, and so on and so forth. Now, look into this evolution of high velocity. Again, high velocity evolution is happening from the core traditional infrastructure-led transformations to all the way to something called as industry cloud. And that's why I started with the industry view, because it's so important that all our big boys, be it Microsoft, be it Google, be it Amazon, or be it Oracle, and of course, Oracle SAPs were the first ones to embrace the industry and then creating industry modules around each function of the industry, right, is moving towards that. And they want to basically create more and more verticalized services models, right? And then it gets, then Gen AI gets infused into that. And how do I basically infuse the whole generative intelligence of an enterprise, both using internal, which is vector database and so on and so forth, as well as leveraging the external like OpenAI or GPT-4 and so on and so forth, right? So now let's dwell into DevOps. So if you look into DevOps, first of all, DevOps is not just a tooling solution. A lot of people consider DevOps and they start with CI/CD, which is continuous integration, continuous deployments or delivery. And they basically look into tools right from building the code repositories to basically deployments, right? So which is auto builds, auto test, and auto deploy. But it basically is a major pivot into how we are basically moving from run or integrating run the business with change the business, right? Because on one side in change the business, we are doing core development functions, and run the business, we are doing core production support or operate functions, right? And then two kinds of players emerged from the skills point of view also. So one is folks who came from full stack engineering. So if you look into the left-hand side, people who were only doing front-end engineering, they started doing back-end also, and then that created a full stack. However, how I orchestrate full stack is not only just east-west, but north-south also. People who are doing applications also understand infrastructure world. And that's how we create a full stack engineer to basically not only just develop and deploy, but manage the application, right? On the other side, the folks came from just the infrastructure configurators or administrators to infrastructure developers, right? Who can not only just build infrastructure environments or provision it on a click of a button, but provision the entire environment, right? Up to provisioning database, middleware, and end-to-end environments, right? And then, of course, this is basically like more not from the manageability point of view. There is a feedback mechanism which also goes into play. And this is what is actually giving birth to things like we are going to talk about site reliability engineering, or things like observability, or even AI ops, right? Where the whole logs get aggregated, right? And you become a predictive enterprise. So these are some of the core challenges of software engineering. And I know some of you who have come from the old legacy world can basically correlate to the legacy challenge. On one side, a legacy has is holding force behind running fast, both because of technology currency, because of availability of skills, because of very monolithic architectures. And on the other side, it basically is very, very expensive also to manage and maintain, right? Then, of course, it has its own set of integration challenges. Then, of course, in the software development delivery challenges, basically, how do I do seamless deployment? How do I basically reduce my staging cycles? How do I build security from the ideation to run, right? How do I maintain the code quality, right? And how much it becomes expensive if the code uh, of the code with bugs goes into production, right? And then, of course, tech disruption, complexity, primarily from the capacity and performance point of view, which basically gets into more of the infrastructure or even the ITOM world also. So this is the evolution we spoke about from the mainframe era to client server to your service oriented or three-tier architectures or web and n-tier architecture, and then service oriented architecture. And finally, now we live in a world where basically everyone wants to embrace or build microservices and API based architecture, very, very open kind of architecture. And then, of course, it's not only just technologies who have evolved, but also the processes also have evolved from the old work breakdown, waterfall based methodologies to more of a Kaizen based, agile, Scrum based methodologies, and we call it more pod based delivery models also. And these are basically the challenges around production support, and because their challenges are very, very different than the challenges we saw on the application development side, right? Which was more related to code quality, more related to integration, more related to security. And of course, security is prominent here also, but more related to technology currency and all those things, right? Here, basically, like challenges are more, how do I basically eliminate my priority one or high critical tickets, right? How do I reduce the mean time to not only address the problem, but also detect and resolve the problem, right? How do I go to root cause analysis much faster, right? How do I manage hybrid environments, right? Again, it's a core challenge which the next generation platforms have brought to us, because it's not only managing the cloud world, but managing the traditional world, and how do two worlds coexist, and what kind of skills are required to manage those, right? And then, of course, how do I cater to testing in a very, very automated fashion, right? And with pattern-based testing, and how do I create more reliability and performance and so on and so forth. And of course, visibility, control, and cost is one of the core component of operation. But again, the cost starts from the architecture, which is the development side also. So this is the evolution, as we saw from the app side. IT operations evolved from right from running siloed operations for infrastructure operations, what Gartner used to call as IO, infrastructure operations and technology, where technology is more the actual components of the hardware and software, and the operations are the people and processes and the tools which are running it, right? Similarly, in Horizon 1 were application production support. So you had different monitoring tools for application, different for the infrastructure, different service desks for running applications, different service desks for running infrastructure operation. And then, of course, the ITIL processes also, you had different instances of ITIL or ITSM processes also. And again, the Horizon 2, and same was the case even with data operations, which has now coming more and more prominent. Earlier, there were no data operations. There were only data warehouse to a certain extent. And again, it was a pre-big data era, right? And then SOC used to be there. Again, SOC also evolved from Horizon 1 to a little bit between Horizon 1 and Horizon 2. But Horizon 2 was the area where apps and infra got integrated, and you created more consolidated, integrated service desk, integrated service management, right? From incident to service request, right? And again, it became much more easier to do root cause analysis, to do fixing also of those, right? And then, of course, there were like integration, which actually gave birth to even to certain extent DevOps also, SDLC integration with ITIL process. And then now we live in the horizon 3, which is basically, as we spoke about, how do we create more AI ops? How do we create more uh, SRE kind of operations, right? How do we create not only SRE only for microservices, but also SRE across the board, where basically I'm not just bothered about SLAs, but I'm bothered about KBOs, key business outcomes, right? And that I can manage through a single pane of glass for multiple landing zones, right? So now look into enterprise DevOps, and this is basically the evolution of enterprise DevOps, and this is what our theme was for today. So if you look into DevOps, DevOps started again, as I said, more in a section of development, right, in terms of code build to code deploy, and again now it has been got into the ops side, and the DevOps was formed. And how can I basically take that code to management also, right? But the challenge of 1.0 was the DevOps was basically done only in pockets or in silos, uh, even in different business units, but and not at a scale. And it was done only for the next generation applications, right, which were built on microservices, APIs, or at least with Java or .NET, right? And then DevOps 2.0 got more into the scaling piece, right? How do I basically replicate and scale DevOps, not only from next generation technologies, but also DevOps on mainframe, right? How do I do DevOps across my hybrid stack, right? How do I do DevOps across the SaaS platforms like Salesforce? How do I do DevOps around SAP, Oracle, and so on and so forth, right? And how do I integrate one value chain rather than multiple value chain or value streams, right, from the DevOps point of view, right? And again, then the third era which we are getting into is basically more where the focus has now pivoted back to developer experience, right? Because the better we enable the developer experience, it gives a better productivity. At the same time, we can basically do multiple releases in a day rather than doing multiple releases in quarters or in years, right? How do I basically create and pivot into more of value stream mapping? How do I pivot more into chaos engineering, right? So all those concepts are getting to life, right? At the same time, in DevOps or DevSecOps 3.0, obviously I didn't talk about Sec, but Sec becomes a integral part on continuous everything, we call it, right? Right from your ideation up to operations and commercialization, right? And the other thing which is very, very important and which has taken a center stage is the whole advent of SRE, site reliability engineering, right? And the artificial AI ops, right? And AI ops has become more and more center stage with the advent of more focus on building the intelligence, or we call it self-learn and self-heal kind of operations, right? How do I build that? How do I do end-to-end service tree mapping and build an automated uh, script or automated tool to look into right from my app layer to up to the IP layer, the infrastructure layer, and all the components in between, right? How do I basically manage it end-to-end perspective? And how do I manage is through the mechanism of feedback. What we were talking about previously is how do I continue to aggregate the logs and traces coming from different sources. So there will be logs created by application, created by APIs, created by databases, created by your components around OS, your logs for infrastructure. So that's why the things like your, say, CloudWatch which monitors, right, the various elements. Similarly, Cloud Trail, which basically looks into the various trails and those kind of things, right? And not only just aggregation of these logs, but doing analysis of these aggregated logs, right? And creating predictable insights to run predictable operations is basically where the next phase of ops for DevOps. And for the dev piece is the whole developer experience and developer productivity, right? Which is coming from enabling a one-touch or zero-touch provisioning of end-to-end environments, right? Including the whole developer kit, right? Including zero time wasted between the code creation to deployment, or between ideation to requirement to coding, right? In a typical model, right? So let me move on to the next one. And this basically summarizes or is the crux of DevOps, because DevOps operate at the heart or core of an high velocity enterprise. And HIVE, Hive is Zensar way of enabling the enterprises to high agility, velocity, and composable operations, and digital engineering. And in digital engineering, if you look into that whole structure around everyone working in smaller pods, right? Like 6-member, 8-member, or 10-member teams, right? And they have basically squads and tribes. So multiple pods come together to do large program, but at the same time, small programs gets executed for each MVP, or we call it MDP, minimum desirable product. And everyone comes from the product centric view and product background. And that's what we call it Pro DG, which is basically more from product centric approach with design thinking and gamification. And in design thinking, we basically also inculcate a lot of components of DevOps, right, into that. And that's where basically you do a true marriage of product engineering, right? And there you also have skills which are coming from multifaceted, right? Not only just, as I was talking about, the full stack engineering, but also polyglots, which are multiple technology skilled people, right? So that's basically where the whole DevOps plays a role of, I would call, more of a orchestrator, not only for digital engineering, but orchestrator for the entire enterprise, right? In terms of making the enterprise a high velocity, agile, composable enterprise, right? So I'm sure most of you are working with DevOps. I see tremendous potential in DevSecOps for years to come, and how it's evolving and pivoting also. We all have to evolve and pivot and embrace it, right? As we build more and more new ways of working, new ways of running IT, changing IT, transforming. Thank you.